Hi everyone, I'm Sean and welcome back to Splash Page. I, like many people who lived in New York for a while, have a certain kinship with the city, and one of my favorite representations of that in TV was How I Met Your Mother. Was it perfect? No, far from it. But quite often they said something that resonated with me and a lot of other people. I also loved a number of the characters and grew kind of tired of some of the others. I'm looking at you, Ted Mosby, throughout its 9-year run. I know the show gets a ton of heat because of the way it ended, but you have to admit that those 9 seasons were a pretty fun ride, and all in all, the show is definitely worth watching. So it's why when I heard How I Met Your Father was coming out, I did get a little bit excited. Now, this show will be airing only on Hulu, so the likelihood of it catching on as a phenomenon like How I Met Your Mother did is much lower. But I thought since we were waiting on a number of other shows to come out, that I would do reviews for each one of the episodes for season 1. And while I'm doing reviews for the episodes, I also will call out Easter eggs that I found calling back to the original series. So as the episode starts, the first thing you'll notice is that the opening credits have the same song as How I Met Your Mother, with the exception of it's a cover using a female voice, indicating that the lead, rather than being Ted Mosby, is going to be Sophie. You'll also notice that the visual slightly changed. While in How I Met Your Mother, it appears that those photos were taken with a disposable camera, here you can see that it's actually on film strips. And Sophie, our lead character, is a photographer. So they're just kind of connecting the opening theme song and opening credits to the characters themselves. The pilot episode begins in the year 2050, where Kim Cattrall plays Sophie, the lead on the show. This differs from How I Met Your Mother in 2 key ways. And to be honest, really smart ways. Rather than seeing the kids, we only hear the son's voice, and we don't see him. And this does 2 things. One, production-wise, they don't have to worry about the kids aging, and therefore can keep the story as open as possible, and not seeing the kid age 5, 10 years, just based on this one story being told. The second is not seeing the son. That would mean that anyone could be the father. As of the first 2 episodes, we assume that the love interest or the potential father is either Ian or Jesse. And just biologically, if one of those were the father, you'd be able to potentially see just by who they cast as the son. So now we jump to present day, which is 2022 in the show, in a non-COVID affected New York City. We meet Sophie, who is our main character, explaining that she was going on a number of Tinder dates, quite unsuccessfully, before she matched with Ian. The first time we encounter her and other characters in the show, she is getting in an Uber headed to her first ever date with Ian, and the Uber driver happens to be Jesse, who is also giving his roommate, Sid, a ride. Sid tells Sophie that he is proposing to his girlfriend, Hannah, who is a surgical resident in LA and has flown into New York to be with him to see a Beyonce concert, which ends up being fake. As Sophie gets out of the car, she takes the wrong cell phone. She actually gets Sid's cell phone rather than her own as she's letting it be charged. The date between Ian and Sophie is fantastic. However, at the end, Ian tells her he's moving to Australia to continue his work on the coral reefs. So he is a marine biologist. Devastated, Sophie returns to her apartment where we meet her roommate, Valentina, and her new boyfriend, Charles, who is from a rich English family, and he forewent his inheritance to move to New York and be with Valentina. Charles is currently living with Valentina and, unknowingly, Sophie. At this point, Sophie decides she wants to attempt to make long-distance work with Ian, but realizes she doesn't have her phone, that she has Sid's phone. So they decide to go to the bar that Sid owns and try to get her phone back. At this point, we get a shot, and in the background, I believe you can see an umbrella lying down, which, if you know How I Met Your Mother at all, a yellow umbrella plays a key role in getting Ted and Tracy together. So I think this is a nice little hidden Easter egg to call out How I Met Your Mother. After getting off the subway, Charlie is very grossed out, and I have a feeling they're going to play this he's a rich guy angle quite often. just based on what we know about his character so far. And the girls say that he witnessed the subway trifecta, which is a person peeing, a person pooping, and a dead person all in the same car. This one was a little bit of a miss, in my opinion. I think they could have come up with three things that were funnier for New York City subways, but, I'm not a writer. We then, for the first time, enter Pemberton's, which we have to assume is the bar that's going to replace McLaren's from How I Met Your Mother. This is a bar that Sid actually owns and is kind of refinishing, and where he chose to propose to Hannah. So there is a surprise party that unknowingly wastes the good surprise on Sophie and her roommates. I looked up the name Pemberton to try to find out why they selected this name for the bar. Other than it being an English surname, I couldn't really find much except for someone saying that it might mean barley field on a hill, which could have some connection to a bar. Hopefully we get a little bit more information on why they named it that. While we wait for Sid and Hannah to arrive, Sophie and Jesse talk, and we find out that Jesse once proposed to his ex-girlfriend Meredith and became a YouTube sensation as she rejected his proposal and he fell off the stage. This reminds me very much of Happy Endings, where Dave was known as the wedding douche based on remixes of the YouTube video of his marriage fail. Jesse then goes on to say he never wants to get married because the only person he could ever see him with has crushed his soul so dramatically. So we're starting to see this divide of person who doesn't ever want to get married, and then we know Sophie is desperately looking for love. Again, another key indication that this could be the father, but it also is very obvious, so I would be surprised if it's that clean and that straightforward. Jesse judges Sophie based on her belief that true love exists, and assumes that it's because her parents are still in love, still married, giving her this kind of incorrect notion of what love is. Sophie responds by telling Jesse that she's looking for, and he should be looking for, his Brooklyn Bridge girl. The meaning of that comes from the fact that Sophie has lived in New York City since college and has never walked across the Brooklyn Bridge. And in doing so, since she's waited this long, she feels that the first time she does walk across it, she should do it with her soulmate. So she is waiting on meeting her soulmate to walk across the Brooklyn Bridge. We then meet Ellen, who is Jesse's sister, and who is also recently divorced from her ex-wife, who still lives in Iowa. So she's new to the city and very much looking forward to taking part in the craziness that is Manhattan. Sid proposes to Hannah, and it's that similar first episode pilot proposal that we saw between Marshall and Lily. However, in this one, Hannah gets a call saying that a transplant has become available for one of her patients, so she has to fly back to LA. Jesse decides to give both Sid and Hannah a ride to the airport, and Sophie accompanies them, knowing that Ian, her love interest, is at the airport currently getting ready for his flight to Australia. Oh, and on the airport, it's the most overused sitcom location possible. Nobody in New York goes to the airport with anybody else. You don't drop off your friends. You let them take public transportation. You let them take a cab. All of the airports are such a pain in the ass to get to. No one would do this. So writers, can we just stop putting meet at the airport romantic gesture thing into sitcoms? It's just so overused. Once Sophie finds Ian, they discuss how long distance is not going to work. It's not just long distance, it's also the crazy time differences, and they've only met once, so they decide to kind of be friends, but nothing more. Sophie, devastated by this interaction, decides she's going to walk across the Brooklyn Bridge, and as she does, Jesse and Valentina talk about Sophie's parents and find out that no, they are not still in love. In fact, Sophie's mother is called a party girl and is never in one place for very long, and that her father has been out of the picture. And just throwing a random crazy Easter egg theory out there, is there potential that Barney Stinson is Sophie's father? Just based on knowing that he isn't really around and that Barney was as promiscuous as he was, I think there's a chance that we see some kind of connection to who Sophie's parents are from How I Met Your Mother. Just an off the board guess right now would be Barney Stinson. But now the really fun thing, Sid and Jesse actually live in Ted and Marshall's old Upper West Side apartment, complete with the swords that hung over the fireplace. And you could see that in the back, the drywall has been fixed from where the encyclopedias had ripped down some drywall and repainted it. We also see a guitar in the background and wonder if this is Jesse's or one of his ex girlfriend's guitars, knowing that she was an artist. They also mentioned that they got the apartment from an older guy and found it on the Wesleyan message boards, knowing that Ted, Marshall, and Lily all went to Wesleyan. I wonder, and I think it'll probably come out that either Sid, Jesse, or both of them went to Wesleyan as well. The second episode is called FOMO. Valentina feels smothered by Charles always being around, considering he now lives with them and doesn't have any friends in the city, and she contemplates breaking up with him. In an attempt to make Charles more friends, they set up a friend date with Sid and Jesse and don't really give Sid and Jesse a heads up on what they're attempting to do. So Valentina gives Charles some advice to help him make friends with Sid and Jesse, but it's basically to not be himself, which we know is probably pretty poor advice considering where Charles came from. Sid and Jesse totally misread this situation, assuming that this is a setup between Jesse and Sophie, which we know as an audience is not the case. They also talk about his shirt, which I thought might be a callback to when Ted Mosby finds a shirt he hasn't worn in a while and decides that he likes it now, but the shirts are very different. As they show up, Sophie is still texting with Ian, which is kind of the first indication to Jesse that this is not a setup between those two. And Sophie and Ian come up with this cute game where they send each other pictures of people that look like Jason Momoa. We also, in this time, find out that Sophie's guilty pleasure song or comfort song is Drops of Jupiter. And we could see in this scene she's leaning against her bed where we have some butterfly patterns on them. Not sure if this is the case or not, but it could be seen as a reference back to Ted Mosby's tramp stamp, which was a butterfly. Maybe I'm reading into that one a little bit too much. Jesse starts to think that he has a chance with Sophie, and when he goes to make a move, Sophie ends up getting kicked out of the club because she is caught trying to take a picture of someone who she believes looks like Jason Momoa. We find out at this time that Jesse is actually from Ohio as well. Ted Mosby was from right outside of Cleveland, and the way it's phrased is that Jesse was told he has the loosest hips in Cincinnati because he went into the hula hoop room of Club FOMO. After that, Valentina ends up breaking up with Charles, and Charles, Sid, and Jesse all leave Club FOMO and head back to the Pemberton, the bar that Sid owns, and begin to talk. And it turns out that the three of them actually really get along. Sophie and Valentina get to the bar to apologize. They make fun of Jersey Bagel. How I Met Your Mother also made fun of New Jersey a lot. Charles is going to move out of Valentina and Sophie's apartment, but they are going to stay together and continue to date. Ellen, Jesse's sister, comes back as she stayed at the bar when everyone else left and had the time of her life, even though she got shot down by every woman she approached and got too drunk. But she's just happy to be alive and to be in this amazing city with all of this opportunity that was not available to her in Iowa. And really that's kind of the point of this episode, is you have to really live in the present and enjoy what you're doing, because otherwise what's the point? You can't just have the fear of missing out always. You're in a position to do something about it now, so you should. At the end of the episode, we see Jesse, who's still pretty upset, not only because he misread the setup situation with Sophie, but also his ex-girlfriend's still very much on his mind, so he tries to play a song on the jukebox, which ends up being Drops of Jupiter. Of course, the song that we found out earlier this episode is Sophie's guilty pleasure song as well. So we know there is that connection. He also talks about how his ex took his cat. He adopted an older cat, an 11-year-old cat that he named Girl, so it could be Jesse's Girl, and his ex-girlfriend stole the cat. Also, another little fun Easter egg here is if you see in the back of the bar these hanging glasses, I'm 99% sure that these glasses and eyeballs represent The Great Gatsby, as it was on the billboard when leaving Manhattan. Take a look, let me know if you agree with this one or not. And the episode ends with the core group of friends who we imagine are going to be the main characters throughout this story. What was your favorite part of these first two episodes, and are you looking forward to how they evolve the series? What other Easter eggs did you guys notice from How I Met Your Mother that I didn't pick up on here? I would love to hear it because I think it'd be great to kind of keep a running tally of everything and then count down maybe at the end of the season how many Easter eggs and how many references we got. So let me know. Please follow along if you like these videos and if you plan on watching How I Met Your Father, as I'll be attempting to do these weekly. Well, I'm Sean. Thanks for watching. Take it easy, YouTube.